This is Dr. Jerome Corsi, and today it is Tuesday. It's November 28th, 2023. Here at the Truth Central, thank you for joining us. We're doing podcasts every weekday. First story I want to concentrate on is the Baltic Sea. And I think the NATO and the United States are moving toward a confrontation with Russia in the Baltic Sea. The backstory of this is that for, I guess since about 2013, the Obama administration with Hillary Clinton as Secretary of State decided that NATO and the whole group of the left decided they have hated Russia ever since Russia, the fall of the Berlin Wall, and Russia renounced communism. And suddenly the left, which had been in love with Soviet Union since about 1917, decided that Russia was a bad place because it got rid of communism. So Hillary Clinton started taking money from Pinochet, who was an oligarch in Ukraine, and she was putting the money in the Clinton Foundation. Hillary Clinton was running her own email server out of her kitchen cabinet and not using the State Department's email server for all of the business she was doing, because she was simultaneously being Secretary of State and trying to funnel oligarch money into the Clinton Foundation. I wrote a book on that called Partners in Crime, about her and Bill Clinton, how they had a racket going on a supposed foundation that was designed to enrich themselves rather than do the good works that they promised they were going to be doing. Typical corruption. So starting in 2013, State Department decided they were going to expand NATO to the borders of Russia, impinging upon Russia's sovereign space as a nation state, as a mega power. And the first moves were in the Ukraine. Of course, Ukraine was probably the most corrupt country in the world, and there was ample opportunities for our politicians to sell America and steal money, which Hillary Clinton jumped on with Bill Clinton. And then Biden followed quickly afterwards. He was vice president. So the vice president, Secretary of State under Obama were given green lights to go ahead and make money through these schemes. Now, the current situation is that in the Ukrainian war, which is at a stalemate, and now Ukraine is conscripting people to come into the army by setting up checkpoints and trying to catch any men they can catch to put into the army and the meat grinder with Russia. That's happening. And now NATO is also expanding into the Baltic Sea. NATO's plans are to have Finland join NATO, become a NATO country, right at the border of Russia. And also then Sweden and Denmark, the whole group of them can come on in. And we can have what they want to call the Baltic Sea, the NATO Sea. Because if you take a look at it, it's going to be surrounded by NATO countries. That little map there shows you from Helsinki, Stockholm, into Estonia, that essentially this is the route Russia has to the Atlantic from the north. Now, Russia is not able, if in fact it's closed off to Russia because NATO dominates all these countries eventually, then that's going to be a cause of war to Russia in Finland. People don't know the history, but in 1939, when Stalin and Hitler had a mutual defense pact, as it were, they non-aggression pact against each other, they agreed not to go to war right away. Russia invaded Finland, did very badly, and invaded Ukraine, did a little better in Ukraine than it did in Finland. But Russia's always desired these two territories because they're the access to the Atlantic from the north through Finland and through the south through the Black Sea, ports like Odessa, Sevastopol, Crimea, and these are all part of Ukraine, or have been back and forth over hundreds of years. Now, what's gone on recently in the Baltic Sea is two things. It was the the Nord Stream pipeline was blown up. And again, who blew it up remains an issue of contest, although there's new information developing on it. And Seymour Hersh released some of it, alleging that the United States was responsible. That caused a stir. At any rate, there's a recent incident where there's a Chinese ship that stopped and lost an anchor. And there was a tearing up of some of these telecommunication cables that run under the Baltic Sea. And they're blaming China for it. Now, China is bringing these huge tankers into the Baltic Sea because Russia is increasing trade with China. And Russia is shipping oil out of the Baltic Sea that ends up going to China and to India instead of to Europe, given that Europe had the sanctions on Russia for invading Ukraine. And Russia retaliated by saying no more natural gas for Europe. So we've got a situation here which is, again, increasing world tensions and increasing the likelihood that we could, at some point or other, go back to a world war. It certainly seems like we're at the beginning of World War III. I'm maintaining that these are insanities. There's no reason why we should be impinging upon Russia's territory. Donald Trump, when he was president, said essentially we would not expand NATO. There's no reason to expand NATO. I'm not sure NATO is a functioning entity any longer. The Western Europe nations are largely going through economic recession. They have, with these green policies, they're abandoning hydrocarbon fuels and going to a much more expensive fuel with wind and solar. Germany is actually deindustrializing. Companies are leaving Germany because the price of energy is too high, and the European Union is wanting to take over sovereignty in many of these states. The European Union is increasingly voting that member states do not have vetoes over certain actions that the EU decides to do. We've got a group of unelected bureaucrats running Europe into the ground. And Europe is going to have a massive, I think, economic recession coming up starting in 2024. It's actually started already, although since 2024 is an election year, I think you're going to find there's going to be an attempt to suppress the reality of the economics until after the election. Certainly the Biden administration is going to want to do that. The Biden administration is pushing the envelope in every one of these areas, funding Ukraine. And the next story, which is being covered in the Epoch Times, is the issue of we're spending these billions of dollars on war under Biden, tens of billions on foreign wars. And the question is, the only clear beneficiaries of this is the military-industrial complex. Because the arms, first we had the pandemic and the pharmaceutical companies got their payday. Now we've got these wars in Ukraine, and we're ramping up tensions in the Baltic Sea. We've got Taiwan as a potential takeover from China any day. We've got the Israeli war with Hamas. And what this means is the arms dealers are making a fortune. And the Biden administration has now got requests for $105 billion more in supplementary security spending. The administration says the money primarily for Israel and Ukraine will be good for the economy. That's how they're trying to sell these arms ramp up. Biden described the mammoth spending package as a smart investment that will pay dividends to U.S. security. And Assistant Secretary of State James O'Brien said this supplemental was a very good bargain. Okay, well, it's a good bargain if you're one of the defense contractors getting this windfall. And by the way, we're moving a lot of old ordnance off the shelves, giving it to Ukraine, letting it be destroyed, and then buying new stuff, which is a great way for the military-industrial complex to make billions of dollars. Now, one of the forces, I think, here that's going to be disruptive is Bobby Kennedy. And Bobby Kennedy Jr.'s campaign has raised millions of dollars. I've been following this very carefully because I think the politics are in a year we're going to have a third-party candidate. With a third-party candidate, it's going to be extremely difficult to calculate the impact on Trump and Biden should they be the candidates. But I want to take a closer look here for a minute at the Bobby Kennedy campaign, because Bobby Kennedy has raised literally millions of dollars. And this has been a surprise to most people in conventional politics. The main effort of the campaign right now is to get Kennedy's name on the ballot in all 50 states. It's a complex process, costs a lot of money, and they're actively working at doing it. But according to the filings with the FEC, the Federal Election Committee, Kennedy's principal campaign committee had about $6.1 million on hand at the end of September, after spending about $8.9 million. And some of its PACs are doing quite well. They're also raising some money from top funders. This American Values 2024 PAC, which supports Robert Kennedy Jr., and has raised literally millions of dollars after he announced he was going to be an independent. Now, the campaign has spent a lot of money. They spent money on consultants. The Dennis Kucinich's consulting group, and he's no longer the campaign manager. He was replaced by this one of the Kennedy family, but yet Kucinich got about $185,000. So the consultants have been paid about $1 million through the end of September, including Zogby polls, and Secret Service has still been denied no Secret Service protection for Robert Kennedy Jr. Even though in September, at an event in Los Angeles, an armed man who posed as a U.S. Marshal was arrested by Los Angeles Police Department after demanding to see Mr. Kennedy. Well, with the assassinations in the Kennedy family, the Biden administration is leaving Kennedy without Secret Service protection, which makes him dependent upon private security. Again, it's expensive, and the Biden administration has no interest in Robert Kennedy Jr. dividing the Democratic vote, which he will do. He will also take votes away from Trump. Now, the major issues that Robert Kennedy has raised that I want to focus on today is his opposition to these wars. He has been on the record as saying we do not need to be spending this kind of money supporting Ukraine and now Baltic Sea tensions, etc. Bobby Kennedy is going to campaign on the Biden administration's economic record, which is dismal, and the amount of money we're spending, billions of dollars in money we don't have, deficit spending. Our national our budget is going up to, we're already at 33, going to $34 trillion in deficit. And Bobby Kennedy's going to have a very strong argument to make to the American people that these wars are not serving our interests, but rather are serving the globalist interests. Why do we need to be going to war in Europe, war again in Israel, when the Iran is not supported? Iran supports Hezbollah in Lebanon and Hamas in the Gaza. Hamas also has a very strong position in Qatar, Qatar, Qatar. But the point is, Saudi Arabia and the other Muslim nations in the Middle East understand that the Shiites in Iran will come after the Sunnis in Saudi Arabia if they should ever get rid of the United States and Israel, because the Shiites are a very, very radical religion. They believe that the family of Muhammad should be the rulers of Islam, not secular leaders like a caliphate and the Ottoman Empire. Instead, they think this young boy, the Mahdi, went down a well, and he's going to come out of the well centuries later. There will be an apocalypse when he comes out of hiding in Shiite Islam will triumph worldwide. So we have here with Iran a group of clerics in charge of the country who have an apocalyptic view of the future and are building nuclear weapons now with the assistance of the Obama and Biden administrations. John Kerry, thank you very much. John Kerry has done incredible damage to the United States, both with his funding of Iran, support of Iran, and his determination to get this climate change movement shoved down our throats, despite the fact that carbon dioxide is not the temperature gauge of the Earth's temperature. It's not the turning knob of the Earth's temperature. It's a minor molecule that has a minor effect upon global warming. And it's not even clear global warming is occurring. We have more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere than we did maybe 150 years ago, but it's far less than we had 600 million years ago, which has been a steady decline of carbon dioxide, during which we've also had ice ages with much more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere than there is today. Carbon dioxide follows warming periods. It doesn't cause warming periods. People do not understand the fundamental science. At any rate, the point is that our financial system is really reaching the end of the line. I was looking at some figures this morning, which shows that the major currencies against gold going back from 1900 to 2023, all currencies you can look at, the French mark, the Reichsmark, the euro, the dollar, the French franc, which is now the euro, all these currencies have lost 97 to 98% of their purchasing power versus gold over the past 100 years. Our national debt is now 136% of our gross domestic product, which is shocking and frightening, because only a few years ago, it was only about 55% of our GDP. We're rapidly accelerating the amount of debt we're incurring under this modern monetary theory, which says that since we're a sovereign nation, we can pay off our debt with sovereign dollars, and just that can be just printed or created or electronically and hypothecated out of nothing. So the dollar itself is down almost 99% in real terms since 1971, when Richard Nixon took us off the gold standard. And paper money is rapidly, paper money, I mean fiat currencies, or currencies like the United States has, where we borrow from other nations and then get charged interest on our money because of the Federal Reserve. This system is doomed to fail. Now, I think that once gold tops $2,000 an ounce, it's going to have a whole new horizon. And I'm not sure when that's going to happen. But from the nature of the economics going on, I think a crash is inevitable at some point. I know that the Democrats are going to try to postpone that crash until after the election. But we're encountering a situation where these world tensions, the determination to increase spending in the military, and I want to talk about a couple of other aspects about Robert Kennedy and JFK in a minute. I want to kind of conclude with that and why I think the housing market is going to completely tank this year. But let's take a moment here. I'm going to encourage everybody to get a copy of this free book right here. The coming global crash will create an historic gold rush. Dean Heskin, who's the head of Swiss America, and I co-authored this book. You can get a free copy by calling Swiss America, 1-800-519-6268. I'm going to repeat that, 1-800-519-6268. It's a good book because it's short, it's a quick read, but it's going to fill you in on a variety of issues, including how gold rises under these various economic crises. And we now have a combination of an energy crisis and a credit crisis that combines what we went through in the 1970s with stagflation. Gold went to $1,426 an ounce by 2010. as we worked out of the Carter years through Reagan's administration with Paul Volcker getting us interest rates above 20%. It was a very painful period of time in the 1980s. Then with COVID, gold has now gone to $2,074. It hit an all-time high, and gold is right now still struggling. I'll check the price this morning, but it is struggling to get over $2,000 an ounce. It has been over $2,000 an ounce. Right now, today, as we're broadcasting, it's $2,016.48. So it has broken $2,000 an ounce again. Let's see if it holds. But this, I think, is forecasting that gold is going to go substantially higher. So Swiss America also has a Walking Liberty $50 offer, or first-time offer for new customers. Chris will show it to you in a minute. If you go to the sponsors and pull down Swiss America, there's a form. You fill it out. Swiss America will contact you, and you can buy up to 250 of these coins for basically their price and their value in silver. Chris is showing you right now how you navigate the site. There's the Walking Liberty $50 offer, and you can fill that form out and contact Swiss America. You get a free copy of the book, again, 1-800-519-6268, and take advantage of this Walking Liberty $50 one-time offer for new customers. People are, by the way, saying I'm looking younger. I'm not coloring my hair. My color has come back into my hair. My Vital C, take a look at it. I've been taking carbon 60 now for 4 years. We're going to start publicizing it very soon. A new book I've written with Chris Burries, Live Longer and Better, about carbon 60 and what it does in terms of its longevity properties. Take a look at these. If you like the program, help us by supporting our sponsors. Okay, next story is about Jack Kennedy. One of the things I've been surprised to find, and Jack Kennedy's assassination, John F. Kennedy, and people say, why do you call him Jack? Well, John Kennedy was called Jack in his lifetime. Jack is one of the diminutives. Friends will call someone Jack. It's common. And Jack Kennedy was charismatic. Towards the end of his life, I think he was maturing into the presidency when he realized in the Cuban Missile Crisis that our military really wanted to go to war with Russia and opposed him because he would not. Curtis LeMay was on the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Curtis LeMay, during World War II, had engineered the firebombing of Japan. Had we lost World War II, he would have been a war criminal. He killed more Japanese by firebombing it than we did with the atomic bombs. Jack Kennedy, towards the end of his life, gave a very famous speech at American University in which he said that we and the Russians co-inhabit this small planet, and we have to realize that the Russians, like us, want to live to an old age, die in their beds with their families surrounding them, and we should not be at odds with each other. He wanted to end the Cold War. And this is one of the major reasons, I think, and increasingly, that he was assassinated, because he was not going to allow the United States to get into Vietnam. And the arms dealers, like they are today, were salivating at the chance to produce weapons for another foreign war, which they got. And companies like Bell Helicopter and many others made millions and millions of dollars producing the war equipment that we used through the Vietnam War, which lasted a long time. Began almost the day John Kennedy died. John Kennedy was withdrawing troops from Vietnam. Lyndon Johnson reversed that order, tried to reverse it almost the day Kennedy died, certainly the day afterwards. And Lyndon Johnson then began the ramp up of our troops in Vietnam, which ramped up through 1968. The war lasted until 1974 or 5, when Nixon was president. Nixon said he had a plan to end the war. That's how he ran for the presidency in 1968. His plan to end the war was to extend the war. Nixon was not ending the war. Ultimately, we pulled out in disgrace. We didn't win a thing. and the Chinese communists took over. Jack Kennedy was right from the beginning that the corruption there was massive, and there was no chance we were going to be able to beat the communist Vietnamese from the north any more than the French had. Now, Kennedy's assassination, I think, is marking an important point with Bobby Kennedy campaigning. And by the way, I'm copy editing right now a book on the Kennedy assassination that I think is going to shock the nation. We're going to be able to demonstrate frontal shots and do it scientifically. That book will be announced here. I'm just basically letting you know it's coming. And Bobby Kennedy's campaign he's not running on that issue. He wants to run on other issues. But Bobby Kennedy is certainly going to be, he embodies many of the qualities of the Kennedy family in terms, I think, of being a peacemaker. Certainly his father at the end of his life was a peacemaker. Jack Kennedy at the end of his life was a peacemaker. And they both ran afoul of the military-industrial complex, which has been determined in this country to have war since the end of World War II. And so we've been at war one way or the other in a Cold War, World War II into Cold War since 1945. Okay, so we've been at war really one way or another most of my adult life. Even as a child, we were in North Korea fighting the Koreans and the Communist Chinese. And what have we settled in all of this? And the fact is that war only perpetuates war. Chris, do you want to comment on this?
Many people remember that it was President Eisenhower that warned of the military-industrial complex. It was almost a joke because hippies overused that term in the late 60s. And I remember even Charles Schultz used to write it into his Peanuts comics because I used to read that when I was little. And I was wondering, I was 6, 7, 8 years old and wondering, what's this military-industrial complex? Well, you grow up and you realize that while many people on the ground level are against war and politicians will mount that out, apparently they need war. The idea was, hey, maybe they're thinking, hey, pull us out of business, pull us out of economic issues like it did in World War II. Maybe it brings, it funds certain donors, it funds certain sectors of the market, like it's doing now. You talked about RFK and his presidency. Well, I'm going to reiterate something I said on a past show, where Kennedy announced during one of his, I believe, I don't remember if it's his official running for an independent ticket announcement or something sometime a little slightly before or after that, but he said that he had a conversation with Mitch McConnell, but he was telling Kennedy that a lot of the Ukraine money doesn't just go to Ukraine. A lot of it goes to American contractors. That's an issue. That's a problem in my book. This means that we're fighting wars. Taxpayers are paying for them. We're suffering the inflation because these people want to pay out certain sectors of the market or certain people they know.
It's also a lot of money stolen in this. I mean, the Ukrainians are famous for stealing money, yes, bribery, and look at the Biden family, which the Justice Department won't even investigate. I think the American people are getting tired of all this. This and the combination of the woke insanity, when Americans are having difficulty with buying homes and putting food on the table for their families. Right now, we're going to be in holiday season. In November, we just had Thanksgiving. We're headed towards Christmas. So there'll be a respite here at the end of the year. But as soon as we begin 2024 in January, we're into a presidential election cycle. And it will get more and more serious as we approach the primaries. The Democrats are going to make a major effort to imprison Donald Trump. He can still run from president in prison. Eugene V. Debs, who is a socialist labor leader in the World War I period, 1917. He was jailed for giving a speech in Dayton, Ohio. And by the way, the Western nations are all ramping up on these hate law speeches. So you're not allowed to criticize the government. If you do, you get disinformation. And I'm seeing it increasingly. There was Tucker Carlson and Steve Bannon were talking about Dublin, which again is, I believe, had such massive immigration that this recent incident, which they're discussing involved an immigrant who began from Algeria, who had actually lived for some 20 years in Ireland without a job on the government dole and began stabbing children. Now, the immigration across Europe has been massive, and we're getting a wave of immigration in the United States right now. And finally, the Biden administration is calling it a foreign invasion, or they're serious about dealing with it during an election year.
Here's something. This is interesting. This is what's going to happen with the election cycle coming. They create two big problems: inflation and mass immigration. They're going to pretend to have solved it, but they've normalized, by the way, high gas prices at this point. So you're looking at 2021 levels. Then you're looking at peak levels from last year, and then you hear the Biden administration bragging about bringing it down from the peak levels. And you're thinking, wait a minute, let's compare it to 2019, okay? Then you turn around and you're watching this mass immigration. You're seeing these sanctuary cities being overrun. Now you're seeing a little bit of a pushback on homeless areas and trying to clean up the streets just slightly. Election season's coming up, and the Biden administration is going to tell you, see what we did? We cleaned up immigration.
Well, they're going to have a hard time selling that one. And the American public, I don't think, are going to be fooled when you face the prices. Let's go to the last story here, because it's making some of the points you're making, which is that these home sales today are dead in the water. The statistics are actually kind of alarming, actually. There's a very good article on Wolf Street. I follow that blog fairly carefully. It's a good blog. What it is Wolf Street, WOLF, wolfstreet.com, written by Wolf Richter. So the prices of new homes have dropped 18% from last year. And it's a couple of reasons. One, there's high inventory because people aren't buying the houses. The housing sales are down dramatically. And a couple of startling factors about this that really even made me think: in 2020, the median price of a home in the United States, median being the middle point, have 50% above, 50% below, basically, in terms of price. In 2020, the median price of a home was $300,000. Okay, but in 2022, it was $500,000. That's a huge increase in 2 years with the pandemic and people coming out of the pandemic and buying houses, largely getting out of the cities. Well, now it's dropping 20%. It's still over $400,000. But I'm saying that before all these economics sort out, it's going to have to get down to below the $300,000 level. And that will happen through a series of foreclosures and high interest rates, which limit the ability of people to buy. When you face 8% interest rates, your mortgage payments are dramatically higher than they would be under much lower interest rates, like 2%, which had been fairly normal. In fact, during the zero interest rate years, when the Federal Reserve was propping up the Obama administration's lagging economy with low interest rates, you had very, very low interest rate mortgages, and people who have those mortgages are not wanting to sell their homes and move into a higher cost home with a much higher interest rate payment every month. So we've got here a situation in which the real estate market is broke, and it's not going to be fixed very rapidly. Now, the Biden administration is going to talk about how we're really not in inflation. While they're printing billions of dollars and sending it off to Ukraine, better get ready. They'll be sending it off to Finland. Finland, by the way, is militarizing its border with Russia. So Finland's anticipating that Russia will react. And yet I'm confident that NATO and the European Union will want to march forward, putting, not only Finland in NATO, but the other Scandinavian countries as well. So we've got a confrontative world in which the tensions are building. And this is a world in which the woke dynamics, a couple of people in the comments were pointing out we should talk about some of the culture wars. Just take a look at the programs on any of the Netflix. I mean, Netflix has got a strong LGBT agenda going. It's shocking to me how many of these videos and films that are on these streaming services are borderline pornographic. I mean, the standards have just changed dramatically. The storylines, LGBT and others, are strongly emphasizing sex, and which ties into a theme I developed in the book I've written on neo-Marxism, cultural Maoism, and anarchy. How the Frankfurt movement, which blended Marx and Freud, emphasized that sexual liberation would be the way to achieve the ultimate utopian experience of the fully actualized human being. That our sexual repressions, according to Freud, had been repressed because of the needs of capitalism to keep us working. And once we have machines and other ways of producing for ourselves, we can be fully actuated and sexually liberated, which means no God, no family. And these are the fundamental bases upon which anarchy occurs. We're in a very, very dystopian period of time. And it's shocking the amount of disinformation that's out there. The idea that we're going to burn up the world because of carbon dioxide is a frivolous and silly idea. We've had geologically much more carbon dioxide, as I pointed out earlier, 600 million years ago. The sun is a major factor. There's increasing science that sun cycle 25 may, like sun cycle 24, be a very dormant sun. That's right. Newsflash, the sun is hot. Well, newsflash, sun heats Earth. When the sun is not burning as intensely, instead of global warming, we could enter a period of global cooling. Now, these trends take time to develop. And right now, we've got also the changes in the Pacific Ocean currents, this El Nino effect, which I think will make for this winter probably a warmer winter in the north with less snow, and more snow and colder in the south and southwest than normal. That's shaping up, I think, for January, February, and March. But the point is, we're going to have this Dubai climate meeting, and you're going to see the hysteria of the climate movement saying the world is going to end unless we quit using hydrocarbon fuels. In 2024, I'm going to do a book on abiotic oil and make sure that is the case. Chris, would you like to have one final comment before we sign off for today?
Oh, yes, the COP28. It's going to be a lot of fun. They're going to be talking about how evil men are. As you said, they're going to be attacking the food supply. But here you go. You were talking about Disney, and I have the perfect meme that I saw just recently on Facebook by a parody page called Disney Memes, right? Everything you're talking about is summed up about Disney in this one meme.
Okay.
All right. Because I'm sure, and for those of you who are listening, it's a meme. It says on the top, I'm sure Disney fully understands. I'm not sure Disney fully understands what a pirate is. And there's a picture of three very cute kids, obviously diverse. Okay, so Disney, sign of diversity. There's one of color, one ambiguous of color, and one white guy with a backwards baseball cap looking bandana, and a parrot.
At least two gendered, and uncertain.
Yep, and a smiling parrot. And the sign itself, get this, the sign itself says, "A good pirate never takes another person's property. Shows the lack of knowledge of history or the deliberate rewriting of such by Disney." A good pirate never takes anyone's property.
What's a pirate supposed to do?
Do they know what a pirate is?
That's why Disney's getting to be very irrelevant. I mean, and these movie themes are just it's. I watched the Oppenheimer movie recently, which started out pretty good, and it really focused on his persecution over his communist ties when he was young and coming up. He was clearly socialist oriented, and destroyed during the McCarthy era because security clearance was taken from him. Oppenheimer went through fighting that. And the story concentrates more on the politics than, of attacking Oppenheimer for his socialist background. So they're trying to make a political statement. It's complex because usually the left was not in favor of atomic weapons. I think today the left, it's hard to know where they stand on any issue. The left is so bizarre these days. The left has just become destructive. The Democratic Party has become a neo-Marxist, cultural Maoist party. And we're probably going to see, if Trump has a serious run, we're probably going to see another round of Antifa in the streets and all kinds of other chaos like we did in 2020. At any rate, 2024 is going to be a very interesting year, and we'll be here to report on it. We'll be changing the website some. I think we'll have more guests in 2024. I'll be continuing to publish. I decided not to be retired, so there's too much going on, so I'm probably more active than I've ever been. In the end, God always wins. God will win here too. We're going to get the judgment of God. We've allowed too many babies to be killed in the womb, torn to pieces, ripped up, cut to bits before they had a chance to breathe a breath outside the womb. We've taken God out of the schools, out of our homes, out of our families. There's too many divorces. There's too many people not staying together. It's a throwaway society in that regard. We're going to have inflation. We could have another pandemic is another possibility. More war. The world is on the edge of thinking about nuclear weapons being used. Russia has tactical nuclear weapons in Belarus. Iran is well along the way to develop a nuclear weapon, which they will most certainly want to use against Israel, I'm sorry. But I don't think, the solution is 2 Chronicles 7:14. The Bible says we need to get on our knees and ask God's forgiveness for letting everything get to this point. We've got to restore moral education. We've got to bring God back into our lives. It's the only solution. And what 2 Chronicles 7:14 says, that if we do this, God will hear our prayer and heal our land. It's going to take an intervention by God. I don't think God created the human race to fail, but it's going to come to the edge of failure before I think people come to realize that this woke nonsense is a intentional redefinition of reality in a schizophrenic sense, so that whatever you want to think you are, whatever you want to believe, everybody else has to accept. No objective truth, no objective reality. It's a fundamentally deranged ideology that is not fact-based or truth-based. That's why I'm calling my recent books The Truth About Energy, Global Warming, Climate Change, The Truth About Neo-Marxism, Cultural Maoism, and Anarchy. Thank you for joining us. This is Dr. Jerome Corsi. Today is Tuesday. It's November 28th, 2023. You can find us on Rumble. You can find us on BitChute. All at the upper right of the website, you'll see all the channels we're on, including audio only on Apple and podcasts and Google Podcasts. Chris is showing you right there at the top of the right-hand corner all the different social media in which we're broadcasting every day. There's lots of ways to hear this podcast, and thank you for joining us. We'll be expanding it into 2024. God bless. We'll be back tomorrow.